그냥 이제 전부 쏘던 힘이 정도는 뭐는 진보는 게 더 바뀌었다는 건 산도셔만 톰바 트제잖라 기시험서로 저로 쓰는 정건선 자고 뜨기션 연달만 지금 분조자라 소라 공기 또반 포를 신기로
I'll begin with the oral transmission.
number 타바 탐 쳐도 디바 지샤와 타바 진본도 야거까다 아리아 아리아 서라고 따라야 상자 하나마 마하야나 Sutra worked Tagbar number Tagba Tamcha do as you shall Tagba Chimbumdo, Sanjetan Shansu Sanwa Tamcha Love Shamsar on the Kotoba Tiasting, Jondan the Yearbook of Sherku, Pombu La Rala, Gerlon, New Gerlon, Chu, Ni Stong, Gerlon, Kindan Chimbo down, Shansu Sanhui. Nikodo Chin Chanchu, Shuanchula, that's Bionova. 需要这个像就生活需要这个业绩当他支持当给你呢东这个忙不当他这个有的地在中等的用什么人连带为地拉个的都能中等的假如看那个人呢像日本他们也弄人呢像日本他们也弄对呢中等的几当子而把知道东什么的东进步就等于看的大的单的집에 겸바당 부풀 복푸르지 견장 복푸르지 견장 득배 득바당 매도 스르메 차 강와당 밥만담 마통 저 야베 케버르케르와 띠르타비 당연zanlar 뇽브르지 소통좀 지통 진본지 된 감단의 참바시와 저거 동저 지니 요비 참바데도 레레 양 요금코르 시와 저저 동 정든데 깔라버 데르 동네 심바당 정든데 지자람고 시험살데 탈모자네 정든데라 시험살장 숙식던 코브르 겨도 동좀 지통 진본지 된지 감도나 네 짱미리 해버 남당 리버 왕식 남당 왕식 첨보 남당 리 왕보 남당 리 원보 흘리 원보 남당 노진기 원보 남당 라마인기 원보 남당 남카르 등거 원보 남당 먹음치 원보 남당 또치 침보 원보 남 지니바데 더 탐치장 용구르 시와 적 드마당 존던데 드마당 존던데 칼라버테르 공테 쳔바당 존던데 기자람고베 시험 사데 타르모자네 추 타르모자네 존던데라 시험 사자 쇼치던 코브로 겨르도 쇼지 지스텐지 감건거는 고시마니 다가나 준상주 선화 첨부 왕체와당 왕체버를 적바 지니바데 더정 존던데 칼라버데 신네 존던데 기자람고 시험 사데 타르모자네 존던데라 시험 사정 축직던 코브로 겨르도 디체 좀 동섬지 동전본지 된지 감더나 즈비 세모니만 사동 흘러동 노전동 지자동 라마연동 남카동동 뭐암체동 또지 전부 왕체를 적바데다 강वर 마지르와나 타나 갑지 카르지 세모즈비 쇼자면 매도 되니 존던데 공상킨 현전도 당연전 텔레비전데 장내장 코로나라 란스무 ዝ송 코로나 ዝግ내장 상계병 바 침보 란스무 자도 장내장 저기 원보 란스무 쇼 저기 원보 란스무 쇼네 장 동숨 지동 전본 지든지 감지 원보 란스무 개발음 자도 동숨 지동 전본 지든지 감 저기 원보 란스무 개발음 자장 점주 전본 원도 제바티 개발음 자네나 number zugso teni tamchadan bin korte da langde tarmo jerne chondan de la shomsarjan koror gyurdo teni chondan de gibjan sangwa sangwa chembo shambalan karsarba mapamba devjan shigba no rambo matokbar yongsim nyengen dabran gerwen dana ki devjan shigba namla yongsu jebe ti yinno dana dana tsodi yinno kede 강 서더 출라 태좀 요바 대장 셔발라 용서 마지나 대장 셔바 문섬 대직베세 더적 그 마지와 깔락저 지 신교버 겨도 이렇게 집가 자라던 전수 상화 전부 시험바 존던데란 더것도 소도 존던데 녀덤 케바 존던데 녀드 팀켄바 초드 켄바 람버름 켄바 람버는 켐밥 좀든데니 탐치는 켄장 탐치도 즈바테 탐치 스토버 특스 쳬바 라가나 좀든데기 추 탐바르남 쳬타바 영토버 조버 상제 탐치기 추기 쓰는데 연랑도 내버린 게르 데르 추 럭버 단도 소르 데니 헤이버 원식 전부 성미 리기 헤이버 쉐와 쳐 야지 용거던 담배 좀 된데 기자 고 시험사대 타르모 저네 좀 된데란들 그 적소도 좀 된데 남버는 타바 탐치도 바지비 추기 남정도 응원기 대정서바 접점 방향도 버족버산 남기 흥원옥송나 티키오 몽보 만바다 티오 몽보라 대와다 대정서베 담방연런도 네버는 게르위라도 좀든 대기 장단도 소르지 소르네 좀든 대기 해외 침보라 제가 막송으로 나오는 자도 대니 대원식 침보 좀든 대기 정 막송하고 나오는 지금 쇼치도 누고 대니 좀든 대기 상주상화 침보 샴발라 과사라 마밤바 데피티기 대정서바 접점 방향도 버족버산 상제 강 남버는 타가바 탐치도 드 추지 남정도 막송아 무직소 막송아 무직소 막송아 무직소 마옹 대정서밤 종와 강 추지 남정도 송을 만지르와 강 멈종오 대집시르제나 강지 그 추운데 장으로 마시브르 추톤바테는 대정서발을 끌어내 봐요 추pon와인 추pon와인 겐단 모바인 스 촉슴라 로버 직바테는 안송 와 셈치노 녀르 송 샴바 테르타베나 리키오 무르기가 강지가 샹치 양탁버 직바 강탁 더글란 치바메 번도바 데덕 추지르 남정도 스톡바 콩도 치버 시바 데니 돗 추탐버 샤고
Well, today our class is on the Mahayana Vaipulya Sutra of Total Retention. And this sutra was taught by Phuntsog Rinpoche. In fact, the sutras taught by Phuntsog Rinpoche is very limited. He taught sutras such as the Sutra of Medicine Buddha, Sutra of 100 Karmic Stories, as well as Sutra of the Wise and the Fool, the Heart Sutra, Prajna Paramita Sutra, as well as the condensed verses of Prajna Paramita. So not as much. But I think the sutras that's taught by Phuntsog Rinpoche would be best to be shared with all of you. Therefore, I am trying to give teachings on the sutras, because wherever you are, as long as you're Buddhists, you will place great attention and importance to the sutras, and you would study it. If I were to only give teachings on the Nyingmapa Tantrayana teachings, then it would be difficult for the Chinese Buddhists and for the other schools of Tibetan Buddhism, because there are some differences between the different schools of Buddhism, such as Sakyapa Gelugpa, and it would be difficult for them to study them or to receive those teachings. However, I think the sutra teachings that's taught by Phuntsog Rinpoche himself, it would be the best to pass down that teaching to all of you. And whenever you have the opportunity, I wish that you could also propagate those teachings to people who have great connections to them. Throughout the history, we can see that Chinese Buddhism definitely propagated the sutra teachings very successfully, and they place great importance to the sutra teachings much more than even the Tibetan Buddhism. The Diamond Sutra, Lotus Sutra, Vimalakirti Sutra are well propagated in China mainland. So this time I'm planning to give you the teachings on the two sutras, that is the Mahayana Vaipulya Sutra of Total Retention, as well as the sutra requested by Maitreya. In fact, this sutra, the sutra requested by Maitreya, was interpreted by me when Phuntsog Rinpoche was giving teachings on it. I would teach and translate on the second day to everyone. Also, that sutra was printed before. It was printed in a large format. I'm not sure if you still remember. It was never printed before that time. This time, I think we have a very special connection to the Vaipulya Sutra of total retention because in terms of the conditions and in terms of the numbers of audience, I think it is not as much as what we used to have. I personally really wish that if there are more people listening to the Mahayana teachings, there would be the more, the better. But it really also depends on the conditions. If we have all the fulfillment of the conditions, it would be easier. But maybe, hopefully, we will all have that conditions later. But this time, only the practitioners who are present in Larongar can receive the oral transmission to listen to this teaching over here. But I think slowly and slowly, more and more people will be able to receive this teaching. And if not many people would be able to receive it, I think they would feel rather quite, they would feel a sense of regret and they would cherish it. And maybe then they would listen to it. So I think that's really how people are. When you want them to listen, they don't. And when they can't listen, they will cherish the opportunity. Maybe that could be a very good, skillful means to encourage people to listen as well. Anyhow, so this is the plan. I will give you the teaching today, and then we'll have the class next week as well, maybe Monday and Tuesday. Anyhow, let's continue with the sutra. The sutra's name is Mahayana Vaipulya Sutra of Total Retention. This is a Mahayana teaching. You probably know what Mahayana means by now. According to the ornament of Mahayana Sutra Shastra, it states that it is called Mahayana. It is because the inspiration is grand, the condition is grand, same as the fruition is grand as well. Therefore, it's called Maha, the great vehicle. So over here, the meaning of great vehicle means that it is of the great aspiration to liberate and benefit all sentient beings, and that is the greatest of all. Especially when we're studying the Mahayana teachings, what differentiates us from the Hinayana or other vehicles, it is most important to remember our goal is to liberate sentient beings, to benefit sentient beings. So whether you are a Mahayana practitioner, it is based on that. And you should observe yourself. Are you or do you have that kind of aspiration? I recently got to know some great masters, and they talk about propagating the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings. They place great importance to propagating Dharma, and they place great importance to cultivating the Sangha and give teachings. But I think in terms of benefiting others, some of them still have a rather weak intention. So we need to propagate the Dharma. We need to have such a great heart and mind to propagate the Dharma. On the other hand, we need to have the great heart and mind to benefit others. So whomsoever you are, whatever kind of ethnic you are, even if you can practice a little bit of beneficial activities to benefit the others, to liberate sentient beings, to try to convince the others to practice the Dharma and chant mantra and practice virtuous deeds, all of these would contribute a great benefit to them. Are we really Mahayana practitioners? I think you should definitely look if you have the mind to benefit others. This is what it means by Mahayana. To benefit all sentient beings and destroy all obstacles and knowing of all phenomena, that kind of wisdom of knowing all phenomena is called Vaipulya. It's great and vast. that there are many different explanations, but in fact, over here, the Vaipulya means to seek for the fruition of Buddhahood and the incomparable wisdom. According to the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, it says that not to destroy or lose the virtue and not to give rise to the vice. So that's the dharani, the total retention, not to lose and destroy all the virtue and not to have any vice or vicious deeds. That kind of teaching is total retention. And in this sutra, it talks about the kind of Mahayana total retention of virtuous deeds, so that there is no way for the vice to arise, and that is the retention, or that is the dharani. We know that the sutra is usually starts from "thus have I heard," and all the way till practice with a great joy. So this kind of Vajra speech taught by the Buddha is the sutra. According to the Buddha Bhumi Shastra, it says that that which could connect and could tame is called as a sutra. So usually whatever teaching that's taught by Buddha himself, other than the Tantra the Vajra speech that's taught by the Buddha is called sutra. So from this sutra you will learn that we need to abandon all the vice and practice all the virtue, which include not to slander. After studying this sutra, you probably will have a feeling that you should have studied this sutra earlier, because when I studied this, I definitely felt that I should pay more attention to my speech. So this is the explanation of the sutra, the name of the sutra. In terms of the interpreter, or in terms of the translator, he is from the Sui dynasty from India, and he's from the northern part of India. He's a Tripitaka master named Vinitaruchi. Vinitaruchi means extinguished joy. There is a school in Vietnam that is the School of Extinguished Joy. So this is a school or a sub-branch of Zen Buddhism. This particular translator came to China around 500 or 600 AD. He's from northern India, and after he arrived to China, in some historical records it says that he stayed in China for 7 years and then went to Vietnam and built some Dharma centers. There's I believe, a monastery named the Dharma Cloud Monastery, and he stayed there and propagated the Dharma over there in Vietnam. Vinitaruchi, in fact, he was the student, a close student of the third patriarch of Master Sun Can. And he attained great realization from Zen Buddhism or Chan Buddhism. This translator was also, his story was recorded in the historical texts, such as the record of great masters. He translated other sutras as well, such as Sutra of the Difference of Karmic Retribution, as well as other sutras. He stayed in. He lived during the Sui dynasty. You probably know that the Sui dynasty lasted for a really short period of time, but he came here around the Sui dynasty during the Sui Wen Emperor's time. There was another translator from India at that time, and the emperor also paid great attention to him. He translated in Xi'an, and after translating, it's been a long period of time. So the sutras he translated compared to the sutra that we have in Tibetan language, there is not much of a difference. It's an excellent translation. Throughout the studying, I really hope that you could have such kind of mindset. That is that I wish I will have the opportunity to propagate and to pass down this teaching to the others. In this way, you won't interrupt your oral transmission. You won't interrupt your listening. And throughout the teaching, I will also notify you if there are some differences in the Tibetan translation, and you can mention it to the people who listen to your teachings as well. During the West Jin dynasty, there was another translator whose name is Dharmaraksha. He translated the same sutra as well, but in under a different title. So there are different translation editions. This time I didn't really have enough time to make comparisons, but I chose the translation by Vinitaruchi. Maybe Dharmaraksha's translation is better, so I hope that if you have time, you can also compare the different translations. I wish that you don't complain about listening to the sutras. Every time after listening to a teaching and you feel that, oh, finally, after such a long time, my back hurts. Don't have such kind of feeling. And try to read after. Try to repeatedly read after the teaching. So this is the proper mindset, the proper attitude to listen to the teaching. You should also compare to the other commentaries, other translations. Otherwise, I'm just saying that, wow, this is different to the Tibetan translation, that is different. This is one way of studying it. If you were to listen to it, rather quite frivolously, then later on, when it's your time to teach the Dharma, it will be very difficult to explain. You can only pass down the oral transmission. Which reminds me of a story. This year at the beginning, I requested a Khenpo to give me some oral transmission, but then the Khenpo said that when Phuntsok Rinpoche was giving oral transmission, he had to go out once, and then he said that he didn't have the full oral transmission, therefore he doesn't dare to give me the oral transmission. We can see that oral transmission is extremely important. Therefore, I request of you not to doze off, especially during reading transmission. If you don't have the reading oral transmission, do not doze off, do not interrupt. This is quite important. So anyhow, let's get back to this translator. We don't really hear the name of this translator, but mainly it's because the translator lived during a more ancient time. It's been a long time, but he is definitely a great translator. There are different editions of this sutra, different translations of this sutra in Vietnamese, in English, French, so different translations that's available globally. After a brief introduction of this translator, well, now let us begin with the actual text. Just like all the other sutras, it begins with, "Thus I have heard." At one time, the Buddha was staying on the Gurudarakuta mountain, the vulture peak, near the city of Rajagraha, together with 62,000 great bhikshus, 80 koti Bodhisattva, Mahasattvas, and the number koti sometimes is translated as 100 million, sometimes is translated differently in the Tibetan language. We've mentioned about that before. And over here it says that, and 60 koti, 100,000 upasakas from the kingdom of Magadha. And according to the Tibetan version, it says that it is of the 60,000 celestial beings, as well as a few thousand of the upasakas from the kingdom of Magadha. There are some difference between the different versions. Over here again, I would like to mention that about Vulture Peak, according to the journey of the West during Tang Dynasty, it states that the Buddha gave teaching for 50 years, some said 49, but majority of the time of his teaching was spent on this mountain. Therefore, the Vulture Peak of India is indeed very important. Therefore, whenever you have an opportunity, I encourage you to go visit and pay pilgrimage visit. According to the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, it says that this is the place that the Buddhas of the 3 times reside, and this is the place that the Buddhas of the 3 times would turn the Dharma wheel. So, according to the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, there's a verse that says that the mountain of Vulture Peak is the abiding place of all the Buddhas and the abiding place of all the sages. So all the great masters, in fact, all the Buddhas of the 3 times would go to the Vulture Peak, as well as the Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas would abide there, along with the Nagas, Yakshas, and the protectors who would always protect the Vulture Peak as well. According to the sutras, this mountain is described as extremely beautiful, but people without faith, I believe they would just view it as an ordinary mountain, an ordinary hill. I went there back in the 90s, and along with Phuntsok Rinpoche, we arrived there on October the 3rd, because it is about 70 kilometers away from Bodh Gaya, and we had to depart from Bodh Gaya in the early morning, and then we went to this kingdom of Magda as well as Vulture Peak. I remember that it was really sunny on that day, and Phuntsok Rinpoche was at the foot of the mountain. Lots of beautiful memories from that time. Phuntsok Rinpoche didn't really climb the hills, but he encouraged us to go. So we climbed halfway through, but we were worried to keep Phuntsok Rinpoche waiting for too long, and one of our fellow Sangha member was maybe a little bit too lazy and didn't want to climb any further, and he said that this is a place where the Buddha turned the Dharma wheel. So we practiced a sacred outlook and then chanted a short prayer. Also, I remember that many people were selling malas, and they all said that this is produced in grew and produced on the Vulture Peak. So I bought a few dozens and gifted to some fellow practitioners. Maybe people don't keep those gifts anymore, but I thought that it was the most precious gifts I can give, because using those malas, people will definitely be able to attain full understanding of Prajnaparamita. So whenever you have opportunity, I completely encourage you to go and pay a pilgrimage visit, because this is the place where the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma of Prajnaparamita, as well as this sutra. So this is definitely a wonderful place. In terms of kingdom of Magda, according to the Sutra of Limitless Life, it says that this is where the King Bimidara, in fact, King Bimidara, after being imprisoned by his son, he could see Vulture Peak from his window. And then later, the Buddha turned the Dharma wheel for him, and then he entered into nirvana and received the second fruition. But from this time, from the modern time, it seems that this place is not that big. The kingdom or the Vulture Peak, it doesn't seem like how the sutra states that so many people reside at one place and attend the teachings. But this could be also understood from a way that the miraculous power of the Buddha is inconceivable. The big can be small and small can be big. This is a miraculous transformation. And then it says that the summer meditation retreat having ended, according to the Tibetan text, this is in fact the last summer retreat of the Buddha. So this is a teaching given by the Buddha close to the time of his parinirvana, including the Parinirvana Sutra as well as Kshitigarbha Sutra. Those are taught during that time as well. So this is close to the later part of or the last part of the turning of the Dharma wheel. Phuntsok Rinpoche, when he gave the teaching of these sutras, he was giving the teachings during his parinirvana as well, around the 1997 as well as in 1998. Phuntsok Rinpoche gave teachings on the Bodhisattva Charavatara, the illusory net, as well as the heart drop of the Lama and the Sutra of 100 Karmic Stories, as well as the Tathagata Shastra. I'm not sure if this means that I am also going to die very soon, because these are the teachings that I've been given to everyone. Maybe later you find out, and maybe you feel that, well, you talk about this every day, but you're still here. Or maybe it would happen, and then you will realize that what I said or my teachings that's given around the similar time. Anyhow, at that time, the teachings given around the time right before the parinirvana of the Buddha were indeed extremely supreme, because they were the teachings mainly focused on the Buddha nature. So over here it says that the summer meditation retreat having ended nearing the time of his parinirvana, the world honored one has entered the in accord with the Dharma Samadhi. The Tibetan version, the Tibetan translation doesn't really have the in accord with the Dharma. It's not that obvious. And then during his Samadhi, the 3,000 large-fold world was everywhere adorned with silky banners and canopies. Jeweled incense vases were well placed, and fragrances were widely spread. Scattered all about were 1,000-petal lotus flowers. So over there, the 3,000-fold world were adorned with all kinds of canopies, jewels, banners, as well as all kinds of fragrance, all kinds of incense, and fragrance powder, incense powder. So all kinds of fragrance would exuberant at that time. And scattered everywhere were the beautiful flowers that spreaded by the celestial beings, as well as the 1,000-petal lotus flowers. So in this samadhi, those were the scenes that appears from such a samadhi. We know that while we're listening to the Dharma, there is a great inspiration, a great aspiration of listening to the Dharma. That is the aspiration of bodhicitta. And there's another aspiration that is called the profound, skillful mantra aspiration. And under this kind of aspiration, the entire phenomena, entire world were under the blessings of the 5 perfections, and they became this undefiled, this pure world. So similarly, the world has transformed to be this beautiful and adorned world, this pure, with great purity and adornment. During the teaching of Vimalakirti Sutra, we also studied that the Buddha was conversing with Shariputra, and the whole world transformed to be completely pure. So during the turning of the Dharma wheel, all the sentient beings were able to experience how the world were transformed and were adorned. And similarly, nowadays, when some great masters would give teachings of the Mahayana teachings, we would adorn the environment with canopies, with fragrance, and with all kinds of display of flowers. In fact, not only during the giving of the teaching, even when the great emperors of when the great emperors visits, we see that from some movies of the past times, whenever there's an emperor would visit or would travel to different places, people would hold different canopies and scatter lots of fragrance as well as a display of flowers. This is a sign of respect to the superior, also a sign of offering. So after the Buddha entered into this kind of samadhi, the whole world transformed into this special phenomenon, special display. And then at that time, in the 3,000 large, thousandfold world, multitudes and hundreds of thousands of kotis, Brahma kings and their retinues in hundreds of thousands of kotis came to the Buddha. In human realm, we can only see bhikshus, bodhisattvas, and maybe retinues of upasakas. We can only see the retinues of the human form. But at that time, the 3,000-fold world of the Brahma kings, as well as all their retinues, all came to the residing place of the Buddha, and then they prostrated to the Buddha, fold their hands together, and then the Buddha. And then upon their arrival, they bowed their hands, heads down at the feet of the Buddha with folded palms facing the Buddha, and they step back to stand on one side. Also, the Buddha came 100,000 of kotis of godsons from pure abode heavens, of the god kings Ishvara and Mahashvara, dragon kings, Yaksha kings, Ashura kings, Garuda kings, Kimnara kings, Maharaga kings, together with their respective retinues in hundreds of thousands of kotis. Upon arrival, they bowed their heads down at the feet of the Buddha. Also to the Buddha from worlds of the 10 directions came Bodhisattva Mahasattvas of great awesome virtue. They were as numerous as sands of Ganges. Upon arrival, they bowed their heads down at the feet of the Buddha with their folded palms facing the Buddha. They step back and then stand on one side. Even the gods from the top heavens in the 3,000-fold world, the top heaven is the highest of the form world. The top heaven is the highest of the three realms, is considered as the formless realm. But could the celestial beings really attend to the assembly from the formless realm? I'm not quite sure. Anyhow, because their job is mainly to enter into samadhi. I'm not sure if they have time. Anyhow, in terms of the space over here, it says that in the Tibetan version, there is no space to put even a hand palm. It is completely full packed. Also, the assembly came all those with great awesome powers, such as gods, dragons, yakshas, Gandharvas, Asuras, Garudas, Kimnaras, Maharagas, and others. It is such a big assembly, but that big assembly can only be seen by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Other than that, through the flash eyes of the dragons, yakshas, and the flash eyes, we cannot really perceive that so many sentient beings were gathered over there. At that time, since the Buddha had already entered into his samadhi, and over here it says that the world-honored one, promptly by the right thought,
任何一个上师也好，就是他们在这个传法的过程当中的话呢，
Through
实际上也是
the samadhi, the Buddha had gathered all of his retinues, all of the sentient beings who had connections. All of these retinues were gathered over there. In fact, when a teacher is giving teaching, we should not only regard that there are only sentient beings were seen by the flash eyes. If we only see a few people attending, or only a few people attending with our flash eyes, we should not get upset, because there are lots of non-humans as well. Sometimes we cannot see them, sometimes we can't see them. Once we went to Burkham with Ponsokul Rinpoche in a hotel. I'm going to tell you a ghost story. Are you going to get scared? At that time, Ponsokul Rinpoche were at a different place, were residing in a different place, but we were living in a hotel, in a different hotel. And then sometimes we would go to Ponsokul Rinpoche's residence and then come back at night. There was once a few of the staff members over there run to me, and they were very scared. They said that we saw a person without a head in the gathering hall, and it was extremely scary, and that person was shadowing in and out. A few people saw it, and I said, it's okay. It seems that I said that it's all right, and it doesn't seem that they were lying. They were really scared. So they requested me to chant Sutra for them, or to chant some mantra for them, to bless them, and asked me to tell Ponsokul Rinpoche. They were very scared that they would get sick upon seeing that. So after a while, we stayed for a little longer and asked them to practice smoke offering. And later, nothing really appeared. Sometimes we cannot really see those non-humans, and sometimes under special circumstances, there are people who could see them. Anyhow, at that time, the humans as well as non-humans were all gathered at the assembly. And the world honored one probably by the right thought. So the right thought, according to the Tibetan version, it says that the Buddha, with his clear knowing, and this right thought means that it is without any grasping. It is clear knowing. And with secret meaning, with a full understanding, the Buddha rose from his samadhi. He looked all over the huge multitude of the assembly as he stretched his body. So he looked over the huge assembly for 3 times. And he stretched his body and opened his mouth. Opened his mouth and opened his mouth, we can say that he yawned and stretched his body. But to say that he yawned and stretched his body is probably not, could not express the magnificence of the Buddha's action at that time. In the Tibetan language, it says that upon looking over the great multitude of the assembly, the Buddha stretched his body 3 times in the lion's posture, because the lion's posture has this magnificence in it. It has the annotation of shaking off the dust from the body. So the stretches of the lion doesn't necessarily mean yawning or how we would stretch, though maybe the lion would do that as well. Whenever we watch those animal shows, we would see that how they would also yawn and stretch their body, but maybe it would be the best to translate it as stretched his body for 3 times in the lion's magnificent posture. Not quite sure how the Dharma Rakshas translation, but in the Tibetan language, this is the translation. The Buddha would manifest in actions such as yawning and stretching. It is not necessarily contradicting, because the Buddha's action would be following the worldly beings as well, would comply to the worldly beings. So there are times he would do that, but there are times, but according to the Vinaya, it is not allowed. You're supposed to cover your mouth when you yawn, according to the Vinaya. So I would encourage you to look into other translations and look at the particular translation. The Buddha stretched his body for 3 times, just like a lion. There is a magnificence in that particular action. After 3 times, the Buddha is about to give teachings. And then at that time, the world-honored one extended his mouth, and his wide-ranging, far-reaching tongue completely covering the 3,000-fold world. In terms of his wide-ranging, far-reaching tongue, this is the sign of the Buddha had already abandoned all the wrong speech, all the harmful speech, all the frivolous speech, and this tongue covers the 3,000-fold world. According to the Tibetan language, it says that he extended the wide and far-reaching tongue 3 times and covered the 3,000-fold world 3 times. And upon displaying his miraculous power, he again looked at the massive crowd. Then all in the huge multitude rose from their seat. They made obeisance with joined palms and stood in silence. After exhibiting such great magnificence of his spiritual power, it must have generated a different atmosphere in that environment. And then the Buddha told Maitreya Bodhisattva, Ajita is Maitreya in Sanskrit.
他说那个佛陀告诉这个阿逸多啊，就是说是如来呢，就是不久的将来呢，就是。
And he said that Ajita, before long, the Tathagata will enter parinirvana.
所有的这些法呢，就是有没有
If you have doubts, do you have any doubts? If you have any doubts regarding the Dharma and would like to ask me, now is the right time. This is the right time to ask me questions. Because as the Buddha is still abiding in this world, then if you have questions, you should definitely ask. I also encourage the Buddhists, when the teacher is still in this world, you should eradicate all kinds of doubts. Therefore, you should ask questions. So over here, the Buddha also asked Maitreya Bodhisattva, saying that, well, if you have any doubts or questions, this is the time to ask, because after the Tathagata passing to parinirvana, then you might have a great sense of regret, and then it would be such a pity not being able to resolve all your doubts during the time of the Tathagata. You may feel very regretful. Why didn't I ask questions when the Buddha was still alive? Therefore, over here, it means that let you be a master or just a practitioner. Whenever you have the opportunity, it is the best for you to pose questions, to ask questions if you have any doubts about your practice. Otherwise, when impermanence downs, and maybe when death downs, and when there are changes in this world, it would be very difficult for you to ask questions. When I went and traveled around with Ponsokul Rinpoche, I do have one regret, and I've expressed that regret before during an interview. I said that my biggest regret was that I didn't have the habit of writing diaries at the time, so I didn't really record everything back then. To the most, what I did was to make a check mark on the calendar. But now, when I look back, many of the things that happened back then was very precious. So last year, I recollected some of the records, and I remembered some of the things that happened back then during the trip to India. And the translator told me that I indeed recorded lots of the precious memories. But if I were to have the habit of writing journals, more precious memories would be able to be recorded. To be honest, out of all the temples in the monastery, I think comparably, I in fact went out with Ponsokul Rinpoche, traveled with Ponsokul Rinpoche the most. The total time that I traveled with Ponsokul Rinpoche, being with him, was over 24 months, over 2 years. I'm not boasting or anything. Anyhow, I came to Larungar back in 1985. Around 1986, Ponsokul Rinpoche traveled to a few counties around Tibetan region for over 6 months, and then he gave teachings on the Tripitaka for 6 months, and I was with Ponsokul Rinpoche together, and we came back on the second year during spring. Around the year 1987, we went together to Mount Wutai and stayed in Mount Wutai for over 3 months, over 100 days. And all the way from here to Beijing, we traveled together. So 4 months together. That was in 1987, around 1988, I can't quite remember. 1989, when Ponsokul Rinpoche traveled to Beijing, and Ponsokul Rinpoche did not take me, rather he took Sutra Lojo Rinpoche as well as Togu Tenzin. And then I went to, and it was because I went to summer retreat, and when I came back from my summer retreat, everything was already arranged, and I remember that because I'm very jealous of them. Around 1990s, I went to Nepal, India, Bhutan with Ponsokul Rinpoche for over 6 months. 1991, Ponsokul Rinpoche went to Chengdu and maybe Mahayana as well, another city in Sichuan province, but I can't remember for how long. I don't quite remember 1992 either, but 1993, Ponsu Rinpoche traveled to United States, Canada, and France for over 3 months. I went together with him. 1994, he went to Kham area, including Qinghai province, as well as a few monasteries. That was the plan. At that time, I really want to give teachings as well as studying and reciting some shastras. And Ponsu Rinpoche asked me if I want to go. I said that if there are people who want to go with you, I would share that. I would give that opportunity to others. Therefore, Ponsu Rinpoche took other couples, and they stayed in Kham area for 2 or 3 months. 1995, Ponsu Rinpoche traveled to Singapore for over a month, together with traveling for 2 months. Sojun Lojo, Khenpo Sojun Lojo, along with me, went together with him. And around October the same year, Ponsu Rinpoche was ill, and originally he wanted to travel to Taiwan and travel to Nepal, the Maritika cave, and then he had to cancel that trip and stayed in Chengdu for 5-6 months in the Pixian County. He stayed there for 5 months or so. It was recorded in the biography of Ponsu Rinpoche. I don't quite remember for 96, but 97 we went to the Puta Mountain as well as Jizu Mountain. It was over 2 months of time. 98, 99, at that time he was also in Chengdu. I was there with him when Ponsu Rinpoche was hospitalized. So for me, that was the time I spent with him. But those are just very brief recording of the time I spent with him, but the things that he said or the things that he taught, I didn't do more recording of such. But now when I thought of it, I do feel regret that I didn't do more recording. There were some brief recordings I did on the calendars, but other than that, not too much other recordings. There are some regrets, but there are some things I don't regret at all, such as listening to his teachings. I definitely tried my best to study. I spent lots of time and was very diligent, and that time I spent without any regret at all. Those were such time that I really cherished. So it is truly difficult to be a perfect disciple. There will be some regret. So over here, the Buddha also asked, saying that, well, this is a time for you to ask me questions, otherwise I'm running out of time. And then Maitreya Bodhisattva Mahasattva said to the Buddha, yes, world-honored one, you best know the right time. You know all the best time. In the Tibetan language, the Tibetan version also says that you know the best time and the best opportunity to give the teaching. You know to what extent that you should give the teaching, rather than the Buddha. The worldly beings have no idea what is the best time or nor the best extent to talk. Sometimes, for example, we get too passionate. Sometimes we get too passive. Even the smallest of our actions could be on the extremes, but the Buddha knows the perfect time and perfect extent of giving the teaching. So over here, then the Buddha said, the Maitreya Bodhisattva said that the Buddha Tathagata has realized that the ultimate of all dharmas. I pray only that you will pronounce it, enabling your dharma eye to abide in the world world for a long time. The Dharma eye over here, what it means is that the treasure of the right Dharma eye, because the Buddha is omniscient, is all-knowing, therefore the Maitreya Bodhisattva saying that may the Buddha extend the teaching of the ultimate Dharma, may the Dharma abide in this world. The Buddha said that, well, you should ask a question, and the Maitreya Bodhisattva did not directly ask a question. Rather, he said, well, you know the best to give the teaching. There is a sutra saying that, there is a sutra named the Dharani Sutra of protecting the Lord of the country boundaries, where it says that the Buddha knows the best time to give teachings, and for that reason the Buddha is respected. Therefore, Maitreya did not directly ask the question, saying that the Buddha must know the best time and the best content to give teaching. So let's continue for 2 more passages. Let's then continue. This is not really that difficult. There's not much to expand from the teaching. So over here it says that in the assembly, the god king Mahashrava's sons and 80 Kotis gods from the pure abode heavens, together with their retinues, surrounded by the Buddha, and bowed their heads down at his feet, joined their palms reverently. They said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, the Mahayana Vaipulya total retention Dharma door has been taught in the past by the innumerable Buddha Tathagatas, also called Arhat, Samyak Sambuddhas. We pray only that the Tathagata now will also expound this teaching to bring benefits, comfort, and delight to innumerable gods and humans, and to enable the Buddha Dharma to abide in this world for a long time." So this teaching has been taught by the Buddhas of the past. And the celestial beings then requested the Buddha to give the teachings, saying that this teaching has been taught by many Buddhas of the past, but please, may the Buddha of the present give the teaching of this again. Just like how the Dharma teachers are requested by disciples, even if there are teachings given by many previous masters, they are still requested to turn the Dharma wheel for the same teaching. The Buddha approved in silence. Knowing that the Buddha has granted his request, the god king Mahashrava's sons were joyful and exuberant. Joined his palms, he made obeisance and stepped back to stand on one side. So, upon observing the Buddha's expression, he knows that the Buddha will start giving teachings now. And everyone was very happy, and they were silent and waiting for the Buddha to expound the Dharma. Then the Buddha told Maitreya Bodhisattva Mahasattva Ajita, "The Mahayana Vaipulya total retention Dharma door is not taught by me only. Innumerable Buddhas of the past, present, and future in the worlds of 10 directions have frequently taught it. And if there are sentient beings that malign the Dharma and the Sangha that say the Buddha's words are not spoken by the Buddha, these maligners, or the ones who slander such teachings will be reborn in the three lower realms and undergo suffering in hell realm. If one were to slander this, you will these sentient beings will undergo suffering. But the Tibetan version is a little bit different. The Tibetan version says that, in fact, the Buddhas of the 3 times had taught this. all the Buddhas have taught it, and not one Buddha has not taught on this teaching. But if the sentient beings do not study this sutra, but give teachings to the others, teach dharmas to the others without studying this teaching, then it is to slander the dharma and slander the sangha. Which means that if you have never studied this sutra but been giving teachings of the dharma to the others for your whole life, then this is this is without knowing the mistake of slandering the dharma, slandering the Buddha. Then in this way you will make mistake of slandering the three jewels, which would lead to the three lower realms. And this kind of fruition is indeed very really horrifying. So we have to know the karmic retribution of slandering the Dharma, otherwise we will receive such kind of fruition. So over here it says that you have to know that this teaching was taught by the Buddhas of the 3 times, and such a wonderful sutra has to be studied first. I really hope that the Dharma teachers should give teachings of this sutra first, unlike me, give teachings for 30 years and then started giving teaching on this. Otherwise, you may not know what kind of mistakes you've made while you're giving the teachings. You may not know when you're slandering the teachings and when you're slandering the Sangha and the 3 jewels. So you should study this first. You should give teachings of this first. And then the Buddha told Maitreya Bodhisattva Mahasattva, originally the celestial being, the son of Mahashrava, asked Buddha, but the Buddha then responded to Maitreya Bodhisattva, saying that if among good men and good women there are those who have activated the Bodhi mind, give rise to bodhicitta, and will accept and uphold, read and recite and explain to the others this Mahayana Vaipulya Sutra of total retention, know that these people will not be reborn in the 3 lower realms. This is quite important. After every class, you should make some little changes, even if it's just a very little change. Because without such little change, even if you listen to classes every day, it would not be meaningful. So this teaching for this class, I really want you to remember this. If you give rise to bodhicitta and recite and chant the sutra, accept and uphold to the others, and uphold this sutra and read and recite to the others and explain to the others this sutra, you will not be reborn in the lower realms. This is the Vajra speech of the Buddha, and you should trust it with 100% confidence. Therefore, compared to the others, I believe I've exceeded my time, but this is the key point I want you to remember. I will try to keep my time for the next class, but I really want you to remember this particular sentence. This is the Vajra speech of the Buddha. If you can remember 1 sentence per class, then after 10 classes, you will be able to get 10 keynotes. This sentence is very touching to me personally. Therefore, I want to share it with you. And I think we should all rejoice that we will not be reborn in the lower realms. This is wonderful.